Hello, and welcome to Triggered Care. I'm Alex. Today I'm going to be talking about triggers, different types of triggers, what happens when we do get triggered, and then hopefully some tips of how to come out of a bad triggering spot. First, let's talk about the different triggers. With PTSD, everyone with PTSD will have physical, situational triggers, environmental triggers. So a sight, a sound, anything that you can really feel or see using your five senses, anything that will connect you to that trauma, whether it was a car accident, an attack, something like that, those will cause triggers. And this is with every PTSD diagnosis, whether it's complex or just good old PTSD. We all get triggers like this. An example of a situational trigger would be about however long ago it was with all the sexual allegations in the news. While that was going on, I had a PTSD storm. And for a while, I could not figure out what it was until my husband pointed out, hey, there's been all these sexual assault cases in the news. And even if I wasn't searching them out, because I really didn't, because I knew that it was upsetting, I still saw tidbits from my favorite shows talk about it. I still saw it on my Facebook. And so even though I wasn't searching it out, just it being in the background, it was starting to consume my mind and trigger my own sexual assault past, which caused the PTSD storm. Next type of trigger would be relational triggers. And these are the type of triggers that you get from being in an abusive relationship for an extended amount of time. This happens after extensive mental and emotional abuse. What relational triggers mean is you have triggers when it comes to just regular relationships with people. Whether it's when they raise their voice, whether it's when they make a joke that you don't take the right way, whatever the trigger may be, it all has to do with the relationship dynamic. And these are a little bit trickier than physical triggers because a lot of times when you're triggered like this, you don't know why, but your self-esteem collapses. You become severely depressed. Sometimes when I'm emotionally triggered, I turn mute. I can't talk. I mean, there's a lot of different symptoms that can come along with this. Some of them are sad, some of them are angry. It's really rough to deal with. An example of a relational trigger. One time my husband and I were out shopping and he made a joke about having to do everything around the house. His sense of humor is very hyperbolic, and a lot of times I can laugh with him, but for whatever reason, the type of joke he made or how he said it triggered me back, and I couldn't talk. I had to hold back tears, and it was very confusing for him because he was in a lighthearted mood, and then all of a sudden I disconnected. And it was impossible to talk to me. It was impossible to get through to me because my brain put up a barrier of, oh, this hurts. I can't communicate anymore. The automatic repression, the automatic disassociation set in. And that's really hard to deal with when it comes out of the blue. And literally it seems like anything can trigger that sometimes. Now, for any trigger, it's going to elicit a stressful response. And it's also going to initiate your reptilian part of your brain to turn on and put up that barrier of, I need to be safe. So, how we can combat our triggers and try to get through them the best we can is, first of all, you need to find a safe space. And this can be hard when you're triggered out and about. I've used public restrooms. I've just sat in my car for a while. I mean, there's lots of public places where I had to kind of hide around the corner and collect myself. But yeah, you need to find a quiet space, the safest space that you can find. Usually it should be relatively close to where you are. I know that when I'm triggered, I really don't like driving because it feels dangerous. So once you find your safe space, you need to try to ground. You need to bring the upper part of your brain, your cerebral cortex, you need to bring that back into the equation. Because your reptilian brain's going to want to take over and be like, I need to survive right now. I know how to do this. And that can cause really bad impulsive reaction. So, trying to ground. Stuff that has helped me: breathing exercises, counting my breaths, focusing, breathe in and breathe out. Meditation every day as practice can help with this too, because it will be more in your automatic autopilot responses if you practice it every day and you get a good feel for it. Another thing that helps me out is sometimes tapping my shoulder, kind of bringing myself back to reality, reminding me what year it is, reminding myself this is where you are, this is what's going on. And then also, once you can breathe, or if you're having really hard time coming back, using a distraction technique. Whether that's watching a funny video or having a breathe and break, listening to a podcast, talking to someone, something to distract yourself from whatever's getting triggered, to try to pull your brain back in and be like, hey, get stimulated, get working. Self-care, definitely research some self-care. It takes a long time to fill up your toolkit. So, once you are fully grounded, then that's when you continue life. I mean, if you're stuck out in public, get yourself home. If you're home, do what you need to do for the rest of the day. But if you can, take a couple hours of a break time to think about what triggered you, why it triggered you, write about it, analyze it a little bit. Little analysis is good, too much is bad, but after a trigger, especially one that affects you so dramatically, it is worth it to take a moment and be like, why did that hurt so much? Make sure you don't repress the trigger that's trying to come out. Because if you do that, if you just avoid it and try to not think about it at all, it's going to keep happening. And what happens is when you start addressing it and you start thinking about it a little bit, just enough to help pull those emotions out of your head and pull those feelings out of your body, those triggers will get better. The toughest triggers to talk about, it seems like, is the relational triggers. And for me, part of the reason why that's been so hard is because it's, especially in the beginning, it's really hard to talk about relational triggers and not project your anger and your rage onto your loved one. It's really hard to pull yourself out of the extreme emotion and really analyze, why am I so angry? And why do I want to say these terrible, untrue things to my loved one right now? Why is there an angry voice in my head trying to get me to say just awful things? And then also, you don't want your loved one to take these triggers personally, especially once you get to the point of recovery where you're starting to understand, oh, it's not that I hate everyone, it's that I'm projecting all of the hate that was put onto me as a kid onto my loved ones. And really getting a good standing and a good relationship, despite the fact that you have these relational triggers, you have these emotional outbursts, it's a lot of work. And it takes a while to really get into a routine of things where the conversations are more comfortable. Me and my husband can talk freely about triggers now. And when he triggers me, I just let him know. And I'm like, it's not your fault, but this is reminding me of this. Or this, I don't know exactly what you reminded me of, but it's something bad. But I know it's not your fault. I know that you're not ill-intentioned. Because, my reaction is extreme and my feelings are extreme with sadness, but that's not your fault. You just accidentally triggered it. Because anything can be triggering in a relationship. A different tone of voice can be triggering. A look can be triggering. A whatever. Like, just him getting annoyed at something not even related to me. Him getting annoyed at his computer can trigger my scared reaction. And so it's really unfair if I were to be like, hey, why are you being like this? When he's just doing normal stuff. But in my world, any sign of anger was danger. So that's how my brain reacts. And throughout the years, I've gotten a lot better with it. He's gotten a lot better with it. It just takes practice. I hope this was helpful. I hope this was educating in some way. Let me know your experiences with triggers. You can share some trigger experiences. It's really tough, especially with the culture where trigger is a funny word to the normies. Oh, I shouldn't say normies, to the normal public or whatever. And that is irritating because triggers are so invasive and they're so horrible to deal with that I really don't want to laugh at it. It's not something that's funny. But sorry for that little rant. I hope you have a good one. I'll be coming out with some more story times soon. And yeah.